Well, welcome to Martalks. I'm Daryl Rosenstein, your host. Martalks, where we discuss contemporary issues in the martech and e-commerce economy. Today, we're very pleased to be joined by Dean Barker, a author, reader, and the head of content at Optimizely. Thank you very much for joining us, Dean.
Thanks for having me, Daryl. Good to talk to you.
Well, I'm thrilled to be speaking with someone as well-read as you. And that's kind of self-evident. I guess, what is this, 5% of your collection?
I have about 1,200 books at home. And if you're seeing me on video, they're all in bookcases behind me. I sold a company 2 years ago, and my wife forced me to spend some money on myself. And so I built myself a library, which I've always wanted. I got custom bookshelves made for my office downstairs. So yeah, I have about 1,200 books down here, much to my wife's chagrin. They're overflowing from the office. So.
Well, I don't think we'll have time to go into any of the reviews, but your website luckily tracks all of the books that you've read. Sounded like 200 a year at a minimum, and you have nice little reviews on there, which is quite helpful for those of us that want to follow along or crawl into the recesses of Dean Barker's thinking and influences.
God help you all.
Well, we're discussing content today, and content obviously being the heart of the equation for commerce and commerce experiences, and the investments that are taking place, at least in the last year, by chief digital officers have increasingly trended around customer experience, really focusing on content, not to the exclusion of other technological initiatives, but it's clearly what has been providing the most value for user experience and a differentiated shopping experience for B2C and increasingly direct-to-consumer companies. So you started off actually as a developer and then transitioned to professional services when you founded Blend. And, as a background, as an analyst, is your current thought leadership to a large extent driven by that experience implementing solutions, or did it come of your actually joining Episerver?
You talk about like content creation and thought leadership. I was doing that at Blend. One of the ways Blend Interactive was a systems implementation company that started back in 2005 with two other people. And we quickly realized that the best way to kind of punch above our weight and to get some exposure was to create a lot of content. And so I've always created content. I maintain a writer's best gift is to be a little narcissistic. And I love the sound of my own writing. So I would tend to write a lot. I had a blog back in the day, right? I was blogging in 98, 99, which means I'm very, very old. But I was blogging kind of back in the day and writing a lot of blog posts. And I got a following from that. Back when blogging, like RSS, was like a community, back before Twitter. And that's how I really started kind of down a thought leadership path. I did a lot of blogging about content management. And then in 2016, while I was still at Blend, I wrote the O'Reilly book on web content management. I wrote one of the animal books, which for better or worse, really kind of puts you on the map in a lot of senses. There were a lot of opportunities open to you if you're a published author, especially if you've written an O'Reilly book for the technical community. And then I joined Episerver, what is now Optimizely, in 2019. And yes, I think that my thinking here is very much flavored by my experience in professional services. I think that there are a lot of people working in enterprise software, a lot of developers working in enterprise software that have never really done professional services. And I think once you have a very different view on what the customer might need or what the customer might try to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that I came up through services. After 15 years in services, I needed a change. But my experience in services has really flavored everything that I do. So.
Well, I've always been a huge fan of that blended experience between services and software, because it it's two sides of a coin. One is obviously representing a company and a value proposition. The other is delivering it exclusively and making sure that the client actually is able to use it. With some agencies it's just they drop it, they drop the ball back in the vendor's court once the client goes live. But it's a different set of experiences that really, I think, inform having a value orientation at all times when you're representing your product and making sure that there is an appropriate fit at your client, that they're not only technologically going to be able to get the solution up and running, but also that they're going to be competent users and understand what they need in order to be successful as users of the solution. But in terms of education, since we're going there, you currently teach a graduate course in content strategy. What are your students taking that education for? Where are they going with it?
So it's a content strategy program. It's the first master's degree in content strategy. And it's based out of basically the University of Applied Sciences of Graz, Austria, which is the second largest city in Austria. And it was one of the first, I don't know if there are more, but at the time it was created, it was the first master's program in content strategy. I actually teach the content management portion, which is interesting because the students there are getting master's degree in content strategy, which is very much kind of a human discipline, really in the humanities. And it's about messaging and things like that. Then I teach two courses that are more technical in nature. I probably teach the two most technical courses in the program. I teach Introduction to Content Management during the first semester. That's a required course for all the students. And then in the last semester, one of the electives that a student can choose to take is Advanced Topics in Content Technology, which is the other course that I teach. And these are technical courses in a non-technical program. We give them a base of content management in the first semester because I mean, everything you do in content strategy will involve a CMS probably at some level. I've always thought, just as a sidebar, that content management should be taught to non-developers. Like if you're an English major in college, you should take a class on content management because there are transcendent principles in content management that really affect anybody dealing with content. But then the elective course goes deeper and deeper on some other topics, things like localization and media management and page composition and how to manage rich text. And I originated both of these courses. I've taught at the university for 7 years. I'm trying to figure out what to do with the courses. I may open them up. I've Creative Commons licensed the syllabus, but I might actually open up all of the content, like post the decks and post the videos, and just make it an open course. I haven't quite decided what I want to do there, but I'm in my 7th year of teaching there, which is, it's fun.
Well, it sounds like a great program to have the marketing community be more aware of, because there are obviously voracious users and creators and curators of content. And there are precious few really, I'd say, complete development programs for them around the technology and around the utilization of the technology at the university level. So in terms of utilizing a CMS, what do brands that are first launching their first really scalable commerce site, who have not ever used a true content management system, need to understand in both selecting and then utilizing that solution?
I think the biggest thing to understand is that launch day is not really the finish line. It's kind of the starting line, right? Things happen when you launch. Getting to launch day is a project, but after launch day, it becomes a program. I always encourage clients, whether they're commerce clients, CMS clients, whatever, to really examine what their post-launch environment looks like. Are they going to do in-house development? Do they have a relationship with a system integrator? How does that relationship work? Is it project-based? Is it retainer-based? I ask them to consider after launch if they want to change to the way the system functions. How is that change going to happen? Who's going to do it? How's it going to be scoped? How's it going to be paid for? How's it going to be delivered? How's it going to be implemented? I think walking through that process can really help them hammer a lot of issues about how their system's going to operate in the real world going forward. Because the answers to the question really dictate the type of system that they should really purchase. If they have no development in-house and they really just want an in-house team of non-developers to do it, then you need kind of a SaaS system that you can work with online and some kind of UI. If they have in-house development team that needs to do deep integration with internal systems. Then you can buy like a more platformy system where you can do some deeper integration, kind of a PaaS system. So you need to take a step back and look at, what is our environment? What does our execution environment look like 2 years from now? And that's really going to help you understand what system you should buy and how that should be arranged.
So what do merchants struggle with most with their content management system? And, that can include the technical limitations of the solution or the lack of training or understanding of what they really need to be prioritizing as they're setting it up.
I think the biggest thing to understand about commerce is that it's really a superset of a content management system. I mean, any shopping experience is based on content. I mean, at a very minimum, you have the name of a product and a description and a picture of it, and that's content. I was on Amazon the other day and I was looking for something, and I realized that Amazon has these great micro content experiences now. If you go to a product page on Amazon, especially pages that were done by some of their partners, you have all sorts of different images and videos you can play. And I mean, the entire thing is just a vast content experience that's wrapped in a transactional shopping application. So once you've experienced this content, I mean, if you want to engage further with that, you can purchase the product. And a lot of companies don't understand that. They kind of discount the content related aspects of a commerce system. I don't want to simplify e-commerce. E-commerce is a very complicated topic. There's a lot going on there, but really it's a content management system wrapped in a transaction management system. And I don't think enough people really appreciate the content part of it. For you to sell something online, for your customer to pay you money and actually go through a transaction with you, they have to be prompted. They have to be motivated to do that. And they're motivated to do that by how you present the product, the content experience that they go through with that product. And then hopefully once they've been through that, they engage with the transactional side of it. So I get a little frustrated when people talk about commerce and they just concentrate on transaction processing and account management, things like that. To get somebody to be a customer, you have to convince them to be a customer, and you do that through really great content experiences. So that's the first thing I would say.
Well, you touched on a pretty crucial shortcoming of a lot of the monoliths on the market today. They don't have an effective content management system. They're constantly having their clients have to go to an external vendor in order to acquire a content management product to better orchestrate their user experience, to again drive the customer through a product discovery and give them the content that they need in order to make a decision, and again to have a good enough experience that they want to come back. But let's transition a bit here, because obviously you spent over a decade on the services side and had a chance to implement, among other products, Episerver, which successfully has become Optimizely. I'm curious what you think a solutions vendor really needs to do from an enablement perspective to endear them to their agency partners and to make their agency partners successful, and then hopefully identify those agency partners that are going to engage in co-development, or at least identify those agency partners that have relationships that they can introduce them to with their clients that would engage in co-development.
We had an interesting story with the partner model with Episerver, because Episerver used to be, like most systems, an on-prem system. You used to actually buy it and install it on your own hardware. So when we first started working with Episerver back in 2008, Episerver didn't do any remote sales. They only sold through partners. They developed a fantastic partner network. And we would sell it and then get 25% of the license fee. That was how it kind of worked. And then once they transitioned to more of a subscription-based vendor, the model changed a little bit. And now Optimizely does direct sales, but then partners can come on board and refer those sales, and there's a referral model. If you are a vendor and you want to develop a partner ecosystem, this is going to sound really obvious, but the number one thing you need to do is respect the fact that your partners and your agencies need to make money. And you need to successfully present them with a way to make money with your system. a lot of vendors just look at it and say, well, you're just going to make money off the professional services. And sometimes that's not really enough because they can make money off professional services with anything else. I think a lot of people don't appreciate when you're in professional services, every 2 weeks, the payroll monster shows up and he wants to eat a lot of money. So there are significant cash flow issues with running agencies. You have clients that delay payment. You can't have vendor partners that delay payment. Like, you constantly need to respect the fact that your agency partners, your implementation partners, need to make money, and make sure you're absolutely a partner in that respect. So that would be my first piece of advice.
Yeah, well, crafting a win-win scenario obviously involves a return on investment on their part, and making sure that you pay your bills on time is what every responsible vendor needs to do.
Don't delay payment. Some of these agencies are strapped for cash. Do not delay payment. They very much need to get paid promptly.
Yeah, well, many of them, they expand their teams for a specific engagement for the client, so they're on the hook. Well, I've had a number of conversations with folks within content, within PIM, within digital assets management, within classic monolithic platforms, as well as the mock community, in terms of where should your content reside, your product data, your product content, and it's your turn to answer the question: is your CMS the best system of record for all your content to be driven out to the website with PIM or DAM or digital marketing? And if I'm not phrasing that correctly, I'm sure that you have a better set of terminology that you can offer. And I'll write them down. And if there's a test at the end of the recording, I'll do my best.
So the first thing to understand about the current state of content is that content management and content delivery are two different things. The act of managing content and then delivering it to a consumer of some kind, two different things. In fact, consumers don't actually consume content. They consume artifacts that are made from content. We have a tendency to look at a web page in a browser and say that's content, but it's not. That's an artifact made from content. Content is the pure ideal. It's the idea. It's the message. The artifact is just kind of the horse it rides in on. So you have raw content, and then you turn that into an artifact, into a web page. But you can turn it into other artifacts. You turn it into an email or a social media update or something like this. And I think that the act of kind of separating content from artifact really helps organizations kind of position themselves on what kind of system that they're looking for. There are a lot of systems where their main channel of communication is the web, clearly still. In fact, for most organizations, the web is still their dominant channel of communications. I have been challenged on that statement. A lot of people have said to me that over in Asia in particular, mobile applications are much more important than the web, and I'll concede that point. But for most other organizations, the web is still the main channel of communications. And so for those organizations, very, very appropriate to have a system that combines management and delivery, combines content and artifact. And that would be a web content management system. There are a lot of vendors in the space today, a lot of headless content management vendors who maintain that that's the only true way to manage your content. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if you're building a website, a web content management system is absolutely the way to go, because there are a lot of problems on websites that our systems have developed, evolved to solve. I have built websites with headless CMSs, and I haven't really enjoyed it. I feel like there's a lot of rework you end up doing, solving problems over and over and over again, problems that have already been long solved. Additionally, a headless CMS really solves the management portion of it very, very well, but it doesn't really solve the delivery portion, the artifact portion. You have to build your own delivery environment. In fact, I've always maintained that headless CMSs don't resolve any complexity. They just kind of move it around. So now where a web content management system would have a whole delivery subsystem built into it to do templating and URL management and things like that, you still have to do that. You just have to bring your own system to do that. So I do get a little bit frustrated there. I think for most organizations, if you're building on the web channel, then a web CMS with a very, very competent API is the way to go. We build Optimizing Content Cloud is traditionally a web CMS, but it stores content as pure data. It always has. The fact that it turns it into HTML and delivers it over the web is kind of incidental. We do it at literally the last possible instant before delivery. And we have headless APIs, and we have all sorts of APIs to work with the content in a more pure form. So I maintain that our system is a web content management system that happens to have a brilliant headless CMS hidden inside of it. And I think that's the right solution for lots of organizations, but I can see that that's kind of a holy war in the industry right now. There are a lot of people with a lot of opinions about it, but I'm the one on your podcast today, and you ask me, so there's mine.
There you go. Well, I will say that we have had and we will have folks that are from the composable digital experience category that would challenge a couple of your assumptions, notably that you have obviously your execution layer, you have your management layer, and then you have your user interface, and being able to have those separately aligned so that you can actually personalize who is receiving what in what channel in real time is only achieved with a microservices based strategy.
What I would do is I would just say to somebody that is putting forth that strategy, if you have a business case justification for that, but I see a lot of people making decisions in that not based off rational decision criteria. They're making decisions just because they've been told that that's the way to go. They've heard these buzzwords and they think that's the way to go. And at the end of the day, they end up spending more money and wasting more time to do something that's not actually going to provide them any practical benefit. I see that a lot with kind of DOM-based templating architectures like React. I think React is fine, and React is certainly appropriate if you have a very interactive website with lots of things on the page changing and data being sent back and forth real time. But if you have a system based on kind of one-way communication, like you're just trying to communicate a point, push information at the user, I maintain you're not going to get any more efficient or any more fast than server-side rendered HTML. And you have organizations that are downloading 3 megabytes of JavaScript to make basically downloading an entire delivery application that now runs inside the browser application and then downloads all the content. For what? To avoid a page transition? I don't get it. I really struggle with that. I think a lot of people are taking some bad advice there. I am not impugning or indicting client-side development or client-side templating or interaction frameworks. They are highly appropriate in many situations, but in just as many situations, they're not appropriate, and they're being applied with such a broad brush right now. I think that some customers are getting hurt. They're spending money and they're wasting time on things that are not actually going to provide them any benefit.
Well, I think that you bring up a great point in that the folks that are on the, I would say, receiving end of these pitches, if they're stuck in a monolithic commerce platform like a Salesforce or a Hybris or a Shopify, they have to do something in order to create a more impactful experience once they scale, once they have a brand identity. And they're getting a lot of different advice in terms of what they need to do on their front end. And that's where the confusion comes in terms of what's the difference between headless and mock and the superiority of one over the other. It often comes down to what's the capability of the users. If they have the sophistication and if they have the ability to manage that content effectively, they might be better off with one system or the other, but we're not going to go too far into that. Anyway, in your book, real world content modeling, and I assume I'm going to get an autographed copy of this since it was such a compelling read, thrilling. I mean, it was a page turner. You introduced the concept of opinionated software, constraining the user to the developer's model. So you kind of open the door then. How opinionated is Optimizely's CMS solution?
Well, it's non-opinionated. Well, everything's opinionated. I mean, everything is opinionated, right? If you use just a raw database, the opinion in a raw database is that things go into tables and they have fields and they have rows. Everything is opinionated. We build on platforms, and everything is a collection of the opinions of the developers building that platform. Some systems are far more opinionated than others, and Content Cloud has the value of being a PaaS system. It's a system you can actually program against. It's built on top of, it's kind of a wrapper around ASP.NET MVC. So it's very, very easy to get into the wrapper and change the things around that you want to change. But we have a number of things in the system to avoid enforcing opinions too much. The system is incredibly pluggable. It's a service-based system, so you can actually pull huge chunks of it out and swap them in if you want. Just the other day, somebody showed me, and after working with it for 18 years, I just now found this, that the method that retrieves content from the repository, so the method which takes an ID and pulls content out of the repository, you can rip that out and replace it if you want. It's a service, and you can just inject your own. I'm not in any hurry to do that because that service does a lot of stuff, but that's an example of how kind of close to the metal you can get. Additionally, it's got an event-based programming model. So anytime something happens with a piece of content, from life to death, a piece of content probably throws 2 dozen events and capture any of those events and change how the system works. So the system works very well at its defaults, but underneath the covers, you can really pick it apart and change some deep parts of it if you want to. For instance, the fact that it even uses a SQL Server database is simply a provider model. You could swap that provider out for something else if you really wanted to put the effort into it. So very deep, dark parts of the system are based on an add-on modular system. So it is opinionated on its surface, but those opinions can be rejected and replaced as you desire.
What do you think is the most classic example of an opinionated software product?
Well, let's take WordPress, for example. WordPress originally, I haven't worked with WordPress lately, but it was a blogging platform, and that was the goal of the system, and that was the opinions of the developers. This should be a blogging platform, and so here is a post, and this is how this works. Now, obviously, a lot of people have done some really amazing things with WordPress, but if remember, WordPress origins was it was a blogging platform, and long before WordPress became this generalized development platform, a lot of people were trying to take WordPress and make it do things it wasn't designed to do because it was designed to be a blogging platform. And they were getting very frustrated. And I kept looking at this and saying, this is an opinion piece of software. This is designed to be a blogging platform. Why are you trying to make it something that it's not? So that's an example of people that have very much tried to push the limits on that. Now, a system that is highly opinionated on its surface, but also deeply pluggable would be Drupal. I know several people deep in the Drupal community that have worked on the core team that have said that as Drupal is delivered, it's extremely opinionated, but it's also built on a modular plugin model, and you can toss things out that you don't want. So there's kind of 2 levels of opinionation. First of all, how opinionated is something, and then how concrete are those opinions? Can they be changed and replaced over time? And so those are some examples there.
I appreciate that. Well, as we touched on it when we started, you're a prodigious reader. What books would you recommend to the founder of a software startup in the e-commerce industry to build their business and understand such critical topics as go-to-market strategy or sales and marketing success alignment and servant leadership?
So the best book I've ever read on business, I read about 5 years ago, and I evangelize every chance I get. It's a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. If you are in any form of business or even just in your personal life, it is a phenomenal book. It helps you understand the relationship between your goals and your activities, which I've never really picked apart quite the same way beforehand. You can't do a goal. People don't realize that. They make these goals and they realize they can't actually do a goal. If you have a goal to lose 10 pounds, well, you can't just lose 10 pounds. You can't just snap your fingers and do it, or else you would have done it. Every goal is a collection of activities. And people concentrate on the goal, but they don't sit down and concentrate on the activities. I have 2 daughters in nursing school right now. And so let's say one of my daughters wants to get an A in chemistry and is the guy who pays her bills. I very much would also like her to get an A in chemistry. Well, she can't just say, I'm going to get an A in chemistry. How's that helpful, right? That doesn't help anything. She needs to come up with a set of activities that are going to help her get an A in chemistry. For instance, she could set a goal that she's going to do all the reading within 24 hours of it being assigned. She's going to set a goal that she's going to meet with a study group once a week. She's going to set a goal that she's going to predict 10 test questions the week before every exam. These are activities that are completely within her control, that if she completes these, there is a reasonable expectation that she will get an A in chemistry. And the book differentiates between lagging indicators and leading indicators. A lagging indicator is the grade on her report card. And it's a lagging indicator because it is a reflection and analytic of things that have taken place in the past. And once you get that analytic, you can't do anything about it. It's like stepping on the scale. Once you get on the scale and look at your weight, you can't do anything about it then. A leading indicator, leading analytic, is things you have control over that you do prior to measuring a goal, things that will lead you to that goal. We spend a lot of time on goals and a lot of times on lagging indicators and very little time on leading indicators. Instead of looking at her grade on the report card, she should keep a scorecard where every week, did she complete the reading with a 24 hours assignment? Did she meet with her study group? Did she predict her 10 questions? That analytic, how she's completing those leading indicators, far more important than the grade she gets on her report card. And that book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, really helped me understand that. So if you are in any type of business or any type of endeavor, highly recommend that book. The best book I've ever read on business.
That sounds like some great advice. I would say, though, when it comes to sales, and we're going to digress for a moment, there's a school of thought that is very data-led, focusing on leading indicators, activities that a sales organization needs to engage in order to deliver revenue, because revenue obviously is the lagging indicator. However, when you're working with enterprise software, which is sold by highly sophisticated sales executives with decades of experience, if you actually want to attain any success, they can game that kind of a system and create the sort of data, the leading data indicators that you're asking for. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's not actually leading to revenue. It's just leading to nice looking reports. The key in revenue is to look at the transactions that have occurred and manage the sorts of activity that is going to drive towards that actual revenue, and talking to the sales executives, the clients, the services people, the marketing team in terms of what went into that deal is a far more impactful manage for managing revenue versus just focusing on data. But yeah, I love your point about creating a set of activities that you need to execute on in order to attain your goal. Well, we're going to close with one of my favorite topics. You are a James Bond aficionado, actually used to publish the official fan website for James Bond. And obviously, I'm a huge fan myself and loved Daniel Craig's run as 007. I'm very sad to see him take his final bow. Who would you like to see reprise the role?
So I would have loved to have seen Idris Elba.
Oh,
back when they're talking about it, he's too old now. He's 53, and Daniel Craig was 51 when he filmed his last movie. So Idris Elba's too old now. There's a lot of debate in the community about, maybe having a Bond of a different ethnicity or even a different gender. And a lot of people use this as kind of, no, we need to stay traditional and everything. And I would love to see them do something different with the role. The thing I understand about Bond, the cinematic Bond, is nothing's set in stone. I mean, actors come and go. And I would be very interested to see them do something different with the role. Perhaps a Bond of a different ethnicity. It does sound like they have one picked now. And he's done a screen test and he's actually filmed the gun barrel screen. The gun barrel kind of opener. And so I forget the guy's name, Andrew Jackson something. I'm not familiar with him, but I wasn't familiar with Daniel Craig before he filmed the role either. But what I would just like to see is someone continue the role in the spirit that Craig brought to it. The two best actors, I believe, to play the role of Bond were Timothy Dalton and Daniel Craig. And that's heresy to a lot of people. But, when you look at Connery and you look at especially Roger Moore and Pierce Brosnan, they brought a levity and a lack of seriousness to the role that I didn't love. Timothy Dalton really took the role in a much different direction. He only did 2 films, but he was a very serious Bond. He was very, very true to Fleming's Bond. And then we went into the Pierce Brosnan years, which was kind of a fashion model, right? And then Daniel Craig really brought it back to this kind of violent, James Bond is a killer. He's an assassin. We talk about him being a spy, but James Bond kills people for a living. And I love the way Daniel Craig took it, and I would just love someone to stay true to that. Whoever they pick, though, just remember, nothing's set in stone. Give it a decade, it'll be somebody else.
Thank you very much for that. And we'll eagerly anticipate that next release. Well, Dean, thanks again for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Daryl, I enjoyed talking to you about James Bond and other trivial concerns like e-commerce.
Yeah. I think it's going to stick around for a
I
while.
think so. I think this one has staying power.
Thanks for listening to Mar Talks. Please leave a review and a rating on your platform of choice. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major podcast platforms. To find out more about how the Rosenstein Group can help you find the right leaders for your client development teams in martech and e-commerce, please visit our website, rosensteingroup.com.